Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 7th episode of the Dice Society podcast. In case you're joining me for the first time, my name is Caio, and I'm the author of thedicesociety.com. This is a show about the upcoming MCDM RPG, where I talk about its development, my playtest experience, and, once the time is right, first and third-party content being made for the finished game. In today's episode, you get caught up in the most recent MCDM RPG news. We have new Ancestry sneak peeks, a VTT demo, and an update on the release of the next playtest packet. I'll go over all of those and a bunch more in the news segment of the podcast. As for our main topics, I have some exciting stuff. First, I'll talk about the Tactician prototype that Matt shared with the patrons, and then I'll tell you all about a playtest I took part in. I'll share my impressions of how the rules are coming together, the class I got to play, and the general mouthfeel of the game. As usual, however, everything we're going to talk about is subject to and probably will change. So don't get your hopes up if you really like any of the stuff I describe here. Cool? Cool. Let's draw steel and get started. As always, we're going to start with the news. Let's go over them in an algorithm-friendly numbered list. 1. The Devil Sneak Peek. This ancestry is exactly what it sounds like. People native to the 7 cities of hell. The main way they become citizens of Orden is by being summoned through a ritual and having the summoner die, leaving them with no way back. Customizing a devil might involve buying features like horns, wings, detachable limbs, tails, etc. Oh, did I mention detachable limbs? Yeah, detachable limbs. Number 2, Polder Sneak Peek. These are MCDM's halfling analogs, and we got a patron post from Willie explaining some of their characteristics. They're nimble enough to ignore difficult terrain, their footsteps don't make any sound, and they can flatten themselves as a shadow into the wall. Is that dope enough for you? Number 3, the VTT is getting cooler by the minute. Go check out Denivarius' post on the subreddit showcasing the ability to stack multiple maps to get a nice parallax effect, indicating each region's height. I promise it's gonna blow your mind. Number 4, magic items are online. In this game, they're called treasures because they encompass psionic items as well as magic ones. James gave an example on stream of the Knife of 9. A dagger that increases its damage bonus with each new attack you make with it, up to a limit of course. Then, at level 5, with each new enemy you slay, the knife gains a charge that can be converted into even more damage. Finally, at level 9, it grants a huge damage bonus whenever you attack after falling on top of an enemy. Number 5, research and crafting are also online. With these systems, you can use alchemical ingredients, monster parts, knowledge of languages, and much more to create treasures by yourself. If this makes into the final game, it's probably going to be a big hook for players to find adventures on their own, instead of just waiting for the director to throw something at them. Number 6, the talent might be replaced by the summoner in the core rules. This is due to the fact that the talent overlaps a bit too much with the elementalist right now, so the summoner could be an interesting substitute. The team will have a clearer idea of the future of these classes once they have kickoff meetings for both. Number 7, the packet date has been updated. As of right now, the team believes that the patron packet is coming before Gen Con, that is, by the end of July. But do not hold your breath. This is not a promise, only an estimate. As for the backer packet, it looks like it will be coming in August. If everything goes according to plan, the game's license is also coming out at the same time, so that the community can start to get to work on their own third-party products. Number 8, the lightning round. Caster kits were reflavored as casting styles, and now they also give your hero a maneuver. The devs have estimated that the monster book will feature somewhere between 350 and 400 stat blocks. The conduit has been slightly redesigned to work with only one resource, now called Piety, instead of two. And lastly, basic attacks have been renamed Free Strikes at the moment. And that's it for our news. Feel free to sit down and relax, as the next session is a long one. I'm going to talk about the Tactician prototype, one of the most interesting Patreon posts up until now. Let's go. I've talked about class prototypes in the past, but they were always skeletons meant to test game mechanics, not actual class mechanics. Now, for the first time, Matt has shown us the real Tactician class prototype in a recent Patreon post. It's a chunky post detailing their whole design process, so I'll do my best to summarize it and get as soon as possible to the juicy bits. If you want to learn everything they can teach you about tabletop RPG design, I highly suggest becoming a patron, because this post is going to be your jam. Anyhow, the first thing we should know is, what the heck is a Tactician? If you were not here for the previous episodes, in the MCDM RPG, the Tactician is their martial warrior class, closer to D&D 4th edition's warlord than to 5e's fighter. They are masters of the battlefield, tactical geniuses, and the best at using weapons. The fictional analogs the dev usually mention when talking about this class are Aragorn and Captain America. So in practice, what are Tacticians good at? In their Theory of Classes meeting, the designers outlined their current thinking for what each class is good and bad at. Our tactical friend has high stickiness and command, meaning it's hard to get away from them, and they excel at leading the party. By contrast, they have low mobility and damage, for example. Knowing this, we can start to talk about the broad stuff every Tactician has in their arsenal. For instance, they get an ability called a Mark, which incentivizes the party to attack a specific enemy by granting bonuses to anyone who attacks the poor target. The inverse ability is Taunt, which encourages enemies to attack you by penalizing attacks against your allies. Besides these two features, they can also grant extra attacks to other party members, give them extra movement, redirect attacks, and etc. See how all of these features make the Tactician good at commanding the battlefield? Well, that's the goal. Seeing all of these mechanics, the three subclasses I mentioned in episode 5 start to come into focus. The Mastermind is a Mark-focused Tactician, a character who leads from the rear, who conducts the battle like a maestro. The Knight Protector, on the other hand, is Taunt-focused, leading from the front, drawing fire to themselves. Lastly, the Insurgent is more of a guerrilla warrior that focuses on dirty tricks like buffing and debuffing, redirecting attacks, that kind of stuff. And don't you forget that all of these names and features are subject to change. Don't come complaining to me when these subclasses switch names and do different stuff by next month. I don't know. You've been warned. Now that we know the high-level overview, we can move on to... Wait. I almost forgot. We haven't talked about weapons yet. In the beginning, the designers were also considering a fourth subclass, one that focused on being the weapon master. Well, turns out that this fits the fiction of every archetype, so it got merged into the base class. With the Field Arsenal feature, every Tactician can wear 2 kits and keep the best bonuses of both. Cool, right? Now I think we're ready to move on from the high-level stuff. The devs got into a meeting and brainstormed the hell out of the features for this class. In total, they listed more than 40 abilities that the Tactician might be able to get over the course of their career. I'll spare you the nitty-gritty details, especially because this list will probably change a lot, but here are some of my favorites. You can force an enemy to go next or last in initiative. If the party is not surprised, the characters can rearrange themselves in the starting zone. Allies can't get tier 1 results while next to you. You can summon reinforcements, maybe during a respite, maybe during a battle. And my favorite, you can move to heal someone, and the number of opportunity attacks you take increase the amount you heal. Unfortunately, none of this comes into play for the level 1 prototype. I just want you to see what a tactician might get as they level up and how cool this is compared to a D&D fighter, which basically just gets to swing their swords more often. Anyway, from this big list of 40 abilities, some were selected to make up first level, and then an MCDM producer created the pre-made tactician we got in the Patreon post. I'll go over each part of the character sheet and tell you a little bit about every single ability the tactician has. It's a lot of stuff, but I'll try my best to make it as digestible as possible. Are you sitting comfortably? Let's begin with the basics. Our prototype has 33 stamina, and that's 21 from the class and 12 from armor. They have 11 recoveries, and coincidentally, their recovery value is also 11. Just as a quick reminder, recoveries are like hit dice in 5e, but you can use them during combat. Now, for a bunch of little numbers. Their size is 1, their weight is 4, their speed is 6 squares, their reach is 1, and their forced move resist is also 1. The characteristics are 2 might, 1 agility, 2 reason, -1 intuition, and 1 presence. The character knows Kalian, Hydraulic, and Zaliak, which in D&D would be like Common, Elven, and Dwarven. They also have some skills: Alertness, Blacksmithing, Climb, Endurance, Monsters, Sabotage, Search, Sneak, and Track. From their career, they get 1 Renown and the Versatile Warrior title. And that's it for the basics. Now we can talk about equipment, class features, and subclass features. None of these are directly related to combat. I'll get into that afterwards. Let's go. The 2 kits chosen by this tactician are Shining Armor, the most protective of all, and Rapid Fire, a kit optimized for quick archers. It's interesting to note that the +3 stamina bonus awarded by Rapid Fire gets overridden by the much nicer +12 from Shining Armor. They also get the signature actions from both kits, but more on that in a second. Then comes the most important bit: focus. This is the heroic resource of this class, the thing which fuels its most powerful abilities. They get 1 focus at the start of every turn, but there are a bunch of other triggers and abilities that can give them some extra focus. Finally, there are some subclass features. This tactician is a mastermind, so they get Grand Strategy, Battlefield Awareness, and I've read your book. The first grants a lore skill, the second slows down marked enemies, and the third is useful for research and getting information about future encounters. Phew! We're almost done, I promise. To finish off, we have to talk about combat abilities, arguably where the tactician really shines. There are 10 in total, but some are more important than others. Let's check it out. Starting with triggered actions. This character has 2. Overwatch, which allows an ally to attack a moving enemy, and Form Up, which lets all allies within 10 squares to shift 2 squares when the tactician's turn starts. Shifting, by the way, is moving without provoking opportunity attacks. And speaking of opportunity attacks, there are melee and ranged options. In this game, OAs happen via free strikes, so there's not much to see here. They both do around the same damage: 4 in Tier 1, 8 in Tier 2, and 10 or 11 in Tier 3. Then there are 4 signature abilities. Mark is a maneuver that you already basically know. It gives your allies an edge on power rolls and an extra 1d3 damage against the target. Seize the Opening forfeits an action in order to let an ally move and attack with 1d6 extra damage. The next 2 are kit abilities. Protective Attack, the one from Shining Armor, deals damage and taunts the target until the end of their turn. And 2-Shot, the one from Rapid Fire, does damage to, you guessed it, 2 targets. Lastly, the Tactician has 2 heroic abilities where they can spend their focus on. This prototype has Phalanx Forward that costs 3 focus and allows every good guy within 10 squares to move and push one adjacent enemy, and Now that costs 5 focus and allows every ally within 5 squares to make an attack. And that's it. We did it. You get a gold star for hearing me list all of these abilities for this long without any visuals. Now I want to know what you think about this prototype. Is it cool? Does it fit the fantasy that you pictured when I described the class? Is it too complicated? Personally, I like it. I think it's a bit complicated for a first level character, but not enough that it's overwhelming, I think. I'd have to play it to be sure, but it feels on par with a third level wizard in D&D. It's got fewer abilities to choose from, but more side effects on each ability, so I'm guessing it will be a wash. Now that we're done with the Tactician, let's go to the next segment of the podcast where future Caio is going to tell you all about the playtest he participated in. See ya there. Okay, so where were we? Oh, that's right, the Tactician prototype. Since I wrote the previous segment, I took part in a playtest of the RPG with some of the fine folks of the MCDM Discord. It was an awesome experience, and I hope I get to do it again in the future. The people were super nice, our director was very patient with our questions, and overall, I had a great time. 10 out of 10 for real. What did I think of the game, though? Well, to answer that, I need more than a few lines of script. So here's how this segment is going to work. First, I'll talk about everything that happened before the playtest. Then I'll tell you a little bit about our actual session, trying as much as possible not to spoil the adventure. And finally, I'll summarize my thoughts and answer a few questions people had for me on the Discord. Does that sound good? So, without further ado, I was selected on a Tuesday to participate on a playtest pool session that was going to happen that Friday. It was going to be a test for the adventure MCDM is taking to Gen Con, so each player had to create a level 1 character and get ready for 4 hours of heroic combat. The rules document was, and I'm not exaggerating, 196 pages long. But it wasn't that bad, hear me out. A bunch of the rules hadn't changed that much since they were shared with the patrons, and some chapters were not going to be used in this particular playtest. All in all, I was able to choose my class and read the necessary rules in a couple of days. The biggest chunk of the document was character creation, which still follows the structure I outlined in episode 5 of the podcast. To create a hero, you simply go through the following chapters in order: ancestry, culture, career, inciting incident, class, and kit. Once you're done choosing those, the rules include a nice optional set of questions that help the heroes in the party forge some connections. Then there are chapters detailing tests, adventuring, abilities, combat, negotiation, research, crafting, and treasures. Most are self-explanatory, except for adventuring, which include rules that, quote, will be organized differently as the game is developed, end quote. Right now, this chapter talks about resistance rolls, hiding, languages, renown, and wealth. To be 100% honest, I love to talk about every single detail contained in the rules, especially renown, wealth, research, crafting, and treasures. The problem is that they haven't shared these rules with the patrons yet, which means that they're probably not ready for prime time. If I talk about them now, I'll likely have to spend another full episode explaining everything that changed in the meantime. Sorry. Instead, let's talk about the character I created, Sohan. Sohan was a devil. He had horns, glowing eyes, and a tail. He was also from Capital, an urban environment with a bureaucratic culture, and had a noble upbringing. A true gentle devil. Before becoming an adventurer, he was a mage's apprentice, but everything changed once he found out that he was going to explode someday. Yep, you heard it right. If Sohan ever went more than 3 days without casting magic, he would explode and wipe everything in a 100-mile radius, including himself. Shout out to the Baldur's Gate 3 crew. For his class, I went with Elementalist. I know I said in the previous episode that my most anticipated build was the Harlequin Mask Shadow, but after I saw the Elementalist class, boy, I just had to go with that. For my subclass, I kept a little bit of the flavor of the Shadow and went with Void for my element of choice. Void mages are good with illusions, teleportation, and the obscure arts. Finally, his kit was the Missile Kit, which allowed Sohan to throw his implement at his enemies like a dodgeball player. He was a cool dude, not gonna lie. If now you're waiting for a full breakdown of all of his abilities like I did with the Tactician prototype, I'm sorry to say that I won't. This episode is long enough with only one character breakdown, and I'd rather talk about abilities that MCDM trusts enough to show the patrons than abilities that might be more susceptible to changing. Once we have an official Elementalist prototype, then I might do another deep dive like today's. Anyway, character creation was pretty straightforward. I just followed the chapter sequence, making choices whenever they were necessary. My main takeaway of this process was how cool inciting incidents are. In my opinion, a few of them have the potential to be disruptive for some campaigns, but overall I thought they were dripping with flavor. Honestly, if they removed the culture chapter and added more inciting incidents, I'd be fine with it. Since there isn't yet an official character sheet, I copied all of Sohan's stuff into a Google Docs. When I was done, I looked at the page count and gasped. 4 pages. 11 abilities that I could use in combat. A handful of others for outside of combat. It was so much stuff that I started to seriously wonder whether I was even going to be able to play this level 1 character. Then came the playtest. In order to respect the privacy of my fellow players, I'm going to be referring to them by their characters. Besides my Devil Elementalist, we had a Dwarf Tactician, a Woad Elf Fury, a Revenant Shadow, and a Time Raider Conduit. As for the adventure, I can't say much. Since they're going to run it at Gen Con, I really don't want to spoil the setup. Suffice it to say that it took place in a 3-story building and we had to work with some time pressure. We strategized and began to fight the enemies. Since we get to choose our order of initiative, my allies moved into position and started to chip away at the enemy forces while I waited for an opportunity to jump in. Once my turn came, I realized that my character sheet wasn't too large, and in fact, it was quite manageable. First of all, about 1/4 of my makeshift character sheet was for outside of combat features, things that didn't matter at all in the moment. Another full page had rules for casting spells, making abilities persistent, generating essence, the Elementalist resource, and that sort of stuff. It's the equivalent to adding the rules for spellcasting and concentration in a D&D Wizard's character sheet. This is important information, but you get used to it after a couple of rounds and it doesn't add any decision points during combat. Then, of my 11 combat abilities, 2 were free strikes, that is, stuff that you're only supposed to use for opportunity attacks and the like. Another one was a one-off thing that granted my allies the ability to see invisible creatures. Again, it wasn't something that came up into consideration during a regular combat. And lastly, 2 of my abilities required 3 or more essence. Since I only generated 2 essence per round, they only came up at most every other turn. On average, I only had to consider around 7 abilities per round. 2 were triggers, 2 were maneuvers, and 3 were actions. A regular-ass level 1 D&D wizard has something like 9 spells available at all times. I didn't have to worry, Sohan only seemed complex because my character sheet was kind of bad. Once round 3 came, I was able to run Sohan like any other fantasy caster I had ever ran, except that I didn't need to worry about running out of spell slots, which is to say, it was fun as hell. Since I reliably generated 2 essence every round, I could think ahead and really plan my next turns. since you do some damage even if you roll low, and I did that a lot, I never felt like I had wasted a turn. Since I had abilities that teleported my allies, interrupted enemies during their movement, and let me throw my crystal ball at people's faces, I was able to focus on the action and not on, slots. Since the game gave me dope options, I was just having fun being a freaking devil that was able to surround himself with explosive fire. And there you go. The 4 keywords of the game. It was tactical, heroic, cinematic, fantasy. This is not to say that it was perfect. No, the game is still not finished. For instance, I felt like I wasn't generating enough essence to do as much cool stuff as my fellow heroes. But it did confirm to me that the game is going in the right direction and fulfilling its design goals, even if it's not a game for everyone. The playtest went on for 4 hours and it was epic. At some point, the Time Raider conduit was holding onto a ledge with their upper arms when the Tactician was pushed off of the same ledge. Using their lower arms, the Time Raider caught the Tactician and held them just long enough that they could climb back to the battlefield. The Shadow took damage on purpose a couple of times so that they could teleport into a more advantageous position. And the Fury must have pushed like a half a dozen minions off of our floor after making sashimi out of their captains. As for myself, I'm proud of casting Explosive Ward and triggering a few opportunity attacks in order to damage and push some nearby enemies. You might think that 4 hours is a lot, but we were 5 heroes and the director must have run around 40 monsters across the 3 stories of the building. If my D&D sessions can be considered typical, this was a pretty good time to run so much combat. After the session, we had 1 hour for feedback. Most of our critiques were related to the adventure itself, so it's not particularly relevant for me to go into that right now. Overall, though, people seemed to like the system. There were some one-off comments about resource generation, ambiguous language, and character creation, but I felt like everyone enjoyed the game. After relaxing about character complexity, however, I was left with the impression that the system was asking a lot of our director. Since I wasn't the one running the session, I can't be sure if that was because of the adventure or because of the system, so I'll have to report on that once the patron playtest packet is out. Only time will tell, but I'm super excited for the future of the MCDM RPG. All in all, I think the system has an amazing potential, and if this playtest was any indication, it could very well replace D&D for a lot of people. And speaking of people, let's answer those questions I got on Discord. Starting with Kolga, who said, quote, "I'd love to hear about the differences in heroic resources between classes and how that affects the vibe/feel for those classes," end quote. Well, I haven't played any other class besides the Elementalist, but I could see that the resource of each class really impacted how it felt. Shadows, for instance, get insight by attacking with edges, so this incentivizes them pretty heavily to get into an advantageous position. On the other end of the spectrum, the Fury rolls for rage at the start of every round, so their biggest tactical decision is whether to use or keep it. The next question was from Mandward, who said, quote, "I would really like an in-depth dive into the mouthfeel of whatever class it is you playtested as," end quote. I hope this whole segment of the podcast works as my answer, but the gist of the Elementalist for me was predictable resource generation and persistent spells made Sohan feel like the most consistent of the heroes, like the only dude who was able to keep their cool during combat. But again, I rolled like ass, so someone else might feel differently. Bella's comment was, quote, "Personally, I'd love a look on how you feel about character creation," end quote. As I've mentioned a few minutes ago, I found inciting incidents to be the highlight of character creation. Culture feels a bit lukewarm to me, but that is super personal. Another playtester even noted how cool they thought the whole process was. Generally speaking, I think layout and wording can have a big impact on this aspect of the RPG, so I reserve the right to change my mind once the game is out. Meat Shield wanted to know about the actual experience of the game, besides the quote-unquote on paper side, and I think I mostly answered that with my playtest report. They also had two specific questions. Quote, on a scale from 5e champion fighter to 5e wizard, how mentally taxing is it to play during combat? End quote. And, quote, does it feel like the martial caster divide will be a problem in this game too? End quote. Playing the level 1 elementalist felt close to playing a 5e wizard at level 2, maybe 3, but without having to understand what spell slots are. As for a martial caster divide, I think this won't be a problem because they are specifically trying to bring martials up to speed with the casters. The Fury and the Tactician felt as tactical and heroic as the rest of us in the playtest. Lastly, Zenward asks, quote, how does it feel to face off against Squinions? End quote. Similar to fighting against Flea Mortal's minions, in that they're easy to kill, but can mess you up in large numbers. The only big difference is that their captains can give them special abilities, so you have to be more strategic with regards to who you're gonna attack first, minions or captains. Before I leave you with the outro, I just wanted to thank everyone who sent me their questions and all of the fine folks at the MCDM Discord. Y'all are really a great community. A special thanks to the people who playtested with me and contributed to me having such a great time. It was really awesome playing with you guys. And that's it for today, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and the topics I chose this time. Make sure to check out this episode's description for links to Matt and James's Twitch channels, MCDM's and Matt's YouTube channels, MCDM's and Matt's subreddits, MCDM's Patreon, MCDM's Discord, all of my socials, and a full transcript of this episode. Before you leave, make sure to rate the podcast in your platform of choice and leave a comment on YouTube if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes. See you all next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.